Why is Tywin the best? Well, hello everyone, this is An American Thinks, and we're here with a special video that I've never done this type of video before, but I think it's going to be pretty cool. It's going to be a Q&A that I'm doing to celebrate hitting 4,000 subscribers. Actually, we're just a hair over 4,000 subscribers as I'm making this. And I had this idea in the back of my head for a while, and I figured, well, why not? Why don't I just give this a shot? And we have a few interesting questions here that some people came up with, so we're going to get to it right now. I hope you guys really enjoy it because some of these are really fun. So why is Tywin the best? And then maybe we'll answer a few questions that showed up at the in the comment section of this one. So why is Tywin the best? Well, Tywin's very good at a lot of things. And if I were going to be, let's say, King of Westeros and I wanted somebody to be a hand of the king, probably pick Tywin. He's going to be, if any of you are familiar with the, what do they call it, the Enneagram, I think Tywin's going to be pretty far on the power spectrum of the Enneagram. He's very concerned with controlling and wielding power. It's not going to make you the most likable person, but it's going to make you a very effective person. And if you're looking for a hand of the king, that's probably what you want, is somebody who's going to be very effective. And in some situations, sometimes you need somebody who's able and willing to wield power effectively. And out of everybody that's written in this series, he's pretty much the best at that. Very interesting character. So we'll get into a few comments here in the comments of that question, which were pretty interesting to read through. And generally, a lot of people commenting back, not so much with the liking of Tywin Lannister very much. You know, it's understandable, and I think one thing that you would point out that Tywin Lannister probably is not the best at is being able to effectively connect with people, like emotionally, particularly his kids, particularly his sons. Probably his subjects as well. People that tend to be obsessed with power and things along those lines tend to forego other things that make them more, let's say, like well-rounded human beings. And being able to engage, say, like with your own emotions effectively and being able to engage with the emotions of others tends to be very secondary to concerns about power. And I think George R. R. Martin also writes that well in these stories. So the next one we have here from Nexus Shadow is, how are you? Yeah, that's very nice. It's very polite. Thank you for asking. I'm doing pretty well. I'm doing very busy myself. I'll give you guys a brief update here on what's keeping me busy, because it does affect this channel in a small way. Last February, I signed up for a boxing match. It's a charity boxing match. It's with the organization called Haymakers for Hope. I'm going to leave a link in the description below in case you guys get more interested. But in brief, it's a cancer fundraiser. Everybody who fights there, it's your first amateur fight. So you commit to a 4-month training camp, then you get your fight. For me, obviously, I'm going to be I'm very super on the super heavyweight end of the weight classes. But anyways, we started training for that last year. About 6 weeks into that, COVID happened and shut down training, shut down the event. So everything got put on hold. Then in July, they contacted me and said, hey, we're going to start doing this again. You want to do it? And I said, yeah, I'm definitely in, which means I get to box all the time in addition to my regular day job, in addition to the real estate, portfolio work. I've talked about it other times on this channel. So it's a full-time thing, but I believe it's for a worthy cause. In 2019, I experienced a lot of personal setbacks that got me to a pretty dark place. It was a very tough year for me. Committing to this boxing match was me trying to focus intentionally on doing something positive, using my time and energy to try to create positivity and try to work my way out of the negative things that I was experiencing at that time. And for something like cancer, I feel like it's something that's just universally resonant. You don't have to be alive for very long before you know somebody who's been affected by cancer or lose somebody to cancer. For me, I've had several people in my family who've had to work their way through cancer and also lost an aunt to cancer last year. So, and it's just going to be an ongoing thing. The longer we're all alive, the more we're going to experience that. So for me, it was something where I felt like I could do something that was good and benefit a lot of people. And it's more to me than just you know, raising just some money, let's say. To me, there's real skin in the game because, you know, at the end of the day, it's my face that's going to be getting hit for 3 rounds here in October. If you're interested in following along, the fights, once they happen, they're going to be on YouTube. So you can watch my fight. I can't promise I'm going to be the best boxer in the world. I'll definitely give it my best shot. If you want to be a part of that, you could certainly participate. But even just watching my videos, in a way, you're also participating. Some of you longtime viewers may have noticed that my channel became monetized here, I think a few weeks ago. And I did that specifically so that the whatever ad revenue I generate here while I'm in this training camp, I'm going to donate it to my fight as part of my fundraiser. I feel like the things that I'm doing with my time right now, since I've committed to this, they ought to be benefiting that. That's a brief update on how I'm doing, and overall, pretty good. Aiden96, how did you get into A Song of Ice and Fire, and what did you think of the show? Well, 2 questions technically, but I can answer both of them. How did I get into A Song of Ice and Fire? So probably this would have been around late 2005, early 2006. I was looking for a book series to get into. I'd been a long-time reader of the Wheel of Time series, and at that time, I had read everything that Wheel of Time had to offer. As you may know, there were kind of some similar difficulties with wrapping up that series. Hopefully not entirely similar. Don't wish George R. R. Martin any ill health by any means. But the book series had started slowing down, and I needed something to read. I think I'd had one friend that had read this series. And then I also, of all things, I don't even remember the name of the website now, but there was like a test, like, it's this generic thing. What fantasy book series would be good for you? And you go through and you punch different things, spits out A Song of Ice and Fire. It's like, well, I'd never heard of this before. I got the first book and started reading it. And that was slowed down somewhat because I'd started my MBA program, which was obviously taking up the bulk of my time. But the summer of 2006, I was taking some condensed summer classes and ended up the month of August with no classes for the whole month. So I had like a month off. But I was a poor college student, and I didn't have anything to do with, like, no money to spend, anything to do with my time. So I just sat in my room, or in my little apartment, I should say, and I just powered through, I think, 2, maybe 2.5 books. Just eating cheap food. I didn't even have air conditioning. I just had like a box fan that I'd point at my bed, and I'd just sit there reading, just devouring these books, and it was amazing. So by that point, I was really hooked. So it's been a while for me. So what's that? Probably 15, 16 years at this point, roughly, depending on when you start counting. Yeah, that's how I got into it, just sort of circumstantial, but it's been a really cool series for me. And then what did I think of the show? I always anticipated that, show, especially for a book series with this depth, you're just never going to be able to translate everything to the screen that's going to be in the books. It's just impossible. There's so many limitations, and I knew that going into it, and to date, I've never actually finished the show. There's, I think, actually, I don't even know how many seasons there are, to tell you the truth, but probably the last 2 or 3 seasons, I don't think I've really watched any of it. Maybe bits and pieces that have filtered through the interwebs, but I haven't actually finished the show. And I understand the show's brought a lot of fans to the books, which is cool, and I don't look down on anybody for enjoying the show. It just got far enough away from the books that I kind of lost interest, because to me, what really got me in was the books. So I'm just sort of hanging out for, the last couple books to come out and, finish it for myself. As far as the show goes, I think they did a good enough job with it. If I had found the show first before the books, I'd probably be more into it, and I think overall it's a pretty well done show. So Sneaky Kangaroo Man wants to know, what are your favorite stories from the Thousand Worlds Book Club? And I notice favorite here with a U, so I'm guessing this is from somewhere in the Commonwealth, but it's a good question. I did, when Preston Jacobs first started the Thousand Worlds Book Club, I did, was reading through those diligently, and about midway through, I ended up pressing the pause button on my channel for a while, and so I didn't actually finish all of them. Now, some of the Thousand Worlds book clubs, Thousand Worlds stories, I should say, I had read before. I think the first Thousand Worlds story I ever read was Meat House Man. And that is a very weird story to cut your teeth on. Actually, it may have been the first George R. R. Martin story I ever read. It was part of some anthology that I read, and it's just like, wow, this is a fucking weird story. But, you know, he has a way of incorporating just enough absurdity to like capture your attention, and you can't let go. I'd read In the House of the Worm, Dark were the tunnels. If I had to pick, probably Tough Voyaging. I think there's enough continuity there to make it interesting, and it's enough of a, you know, where it follows one protagonist, and it's a kind of a protagonist where, for me, I feel like I can really engage with that protagonist more. Some of George R. R. Martin's protagonists are more like dark and brooding, and, you know, like emotionally, I don't know, they're like in a stagnant place, I guess. If you're doing that too much, you know, it's hard to engage with it. So probably Tough Voyaging, I guess. I don't know if I could necessarily pick a particular one. I think they're all interesting for their own various reasons. Probably that one, Tough Voyaging. So kind of on a similar note here, Avi Moses, what's your favorite chapter in the series? That is a very hard question to answer. It's very hard. There's a lot of, I like pretty much anything that has to do with Jon. He's probably my favorite character to read. Tyrion's also, I'd say, like, he's a close second. Bran chapters are, there's a lot of fascinating Bran chapters there. You know, Dany's, it's not to say like she's not an interesting character, but, you know, the way that he writes her, I guess I don't personally relate to her as much, and a lot of her story seems more like travelogue-y rather than more like a character-driven type of plot. My personal reading of the books, I've always accepted from the get-go, from the prologue of A Game of Thrones, it's like all the important stuff in this book, or these books, I should say, it's going to happen at the Wall or north of the Wall. And everything else that happens it's a sideshow. You know, as soon as you know that the others are there, you know, they see them in the prologue, you know that the others are there, and then you start realizing it's like, oh, nobody believes that these things are real, but we know that they're real because, boom, they're right there. Some of the characters may be interesting, you know, like the Jaime story, you know, Tyrion, some Dany stuff, you know, it's interesting, but really the stuff that's very gripping happens at the Wall or north of the Wall, and just because of the way that the books are, that ends up being Jon Snow. I feel like the character of Jon Snow I relate to a lot with personally. There's one chapter with Jon Snow that's one of 3 times that I've ever cried while reading a book, and for that matter, it's the only fiction book that I've ever cried while reading this thing. So that was a very moving chapter. I don't know if I necessarily say it was my favorite. Gosh, it's awful hard to say what's my favorite. I'm going to start rambling here. It could be so many of them. Probably a Jon Snow chapter. So Nell here is saying, I'd love to hear you talk about Stannis. Also, how do you feel about the whole lemongate conspiracy? Okay, this could end up taking a very long time if I just talk about Stannis, because there's a lot of things that you can say about this dude. He's kind of like a Ned character, where he has a very strong belief in ethics, the law, legalism. Let's say he's a very legalistic character. Maybe that's the right term to throw out there. You know, they're both kind of written in that same vein, and particularly with Stannis because he's around a lot longer, but a little bit with Ned as well. You see that they're driven by these things, but yet at some point they're willing to make concessions when it's in their benefit, right? Like Ned, obviously, has Jon Snow, right? And it's like this big black mark against his honor, his personal honor, but he's doing this for a reason, right? And we have to believe that somehow he thinks this reason must benefit him, that he's going to keep Jon Snow around. So in kind of the same way with Stannis, right? He's very legalistic, very, black and white. Everything, is either bad or good. But for somebody who's from Westeros and was raised with the faith of the Seven, and strangely, as soon as Melisandre comes around, and hey, he could be, this really cool guy. Well, it turns out like maybe he wants to follow R'hllor, and you can see like how he starts compromising on really who he is and his personal ethics. And I'm like, well, maybe I'll just start doing this. Maybe I'll just start doing that. Maybe if I do enough of this, then I can be king. So as far as Lemongate, I do believe that it's a bit of a Chekhov's gun, or Chekhov's lemons, if you will. I do believe George R. R. Martin wrote about lemons intentionally. I do think lemons tend to grow in certain types of climates and not so well in other types of climates. So some of Dany's backstory may not be quite, not necessarily as she remembers it, because I think she's remembering it correctly, but I don't think it's quite as maybe as it's been told to her, let's say. Is there a Lemongate conspiracy? Sure. I think that there's something going on there more than what Dany just remembers. Okay, so for Clan Toriander, you had a fantastic analysis on the economics of the North. Thank you. Wouldn't mind seeing what you had to say on the rest of Westeros in that regard, particularly the seemingly broke nuggets in Dorne. To me, when I looked at the map of the North, it sort of intuitively made sense. You see the rivers running to one direction, which basically don't go to anywhere. They go to where there's a bunch of pirates. There's no continent on that side. To the west, it's just a big ocean. The only trade there is going to basically go up and down the western coast of Westeros, and that's it. Whereas the other rivers, and particularly this one big river, they run towards the east. There's Essos there. There's King's Landing there. There's every place that you'd want to be pretty much goes there. Who happens to be at the mouth of that river? Wyman Manderley. And throughout the course of the story, here's Wyman Manderley, going around trying to take over parts of other rivers. And you can see this progression here. It's like, wow, if they end up taking out the Boltons, he's gonna have everything. It just sort of intuitively made sense. I didn't even really spend a lot of time theorizing about it. I just looked at a map and was like, huh, here's what's happening. I think part of that is just because I've had a long time fascination with naval history and maritime history. Part of it, as I've mentioned previously in this video, I've mostly been interested in the North, and particularly the Wall and what happens north of the Wall, because I think that's going to have the most bearing on the future of this world. I've spent more time looking at the North than the south of Westeros or Essos, pretty much any of these other places. I suppose I could do this. If I did, it's going to be a lot longer than this. It's going to take at least a theory video to put that together. I may do something like this. If it is, it's going to be big enough that I can't really answer it here. It's going to have to be its own theory video. So if that happens, stay tuned, and I'll definitely give you a shout out for coming up with this idea. Okay, last one here from Ryan Rain. My question is, with the new evidence from the iBook author's annotations on Davos 1, A Dance with Dragons, that Jon was born during the sack of King's Landing, what evidence can you think of that's compelling enough for RLJ to be true? With Jon being born during the sack, when Ned was in King's Landing, and Ned finding Leah after she very recently gave birth, Bed of Blood, along with a combination of Zero Dragon symbolism and Double the Dawn references of the character with the second most, and George R. R. Martin's wife laughing at people who told her RLJ was true, being quoted as responding, "Do you honestly think George would do something as simple as RLJ?" It seems like NAJ is a pretty open and shut case to me. So I was wondering, what evidence do you see that you still believing in RLJ? Okay. So there's a lot going on here. So, and it's, obviously, this person is definitely keeping up with the fandom here. Like a lot of these things, I'm not really. So for example, I personally don't own the iBook authors, or well, I guess it'd just be the iBook version, I guess, of A Dance with Dragons. I don't use iBooks, so I wouldn't have read that. I'm also not familiar with What's referenced here is George's wife laughing at people who told her RLJ was true. Let's address the underlying argument here. The way that George R. R. Martin writes, there's always going to be ambiguity. He almost never gives you a clear answer on anything, particularly major plot points in the book, like who Jon Snow's parents really are. We may never actually get a definitive answer on who Jon Snow is in the books. The way that he's writing them, there's obviously going to be things that you could point to and say, well, what about this? How can you possibly believe this if this, right? But then there's stuff on the other side, you're like, well, then how can you possibly believe this given this? So out of the ambiguity of evidence that's out there, you have to look at the books and take sort of your own assessment and decide for yourself, what do you think is most likely true? And it could be true that Rhaegar and Lyanna are not Jon's parents. But I think my most compelling reason why I come down on the side of that, for one, well, I guess it's going to really turn into two things. For one, thematically, it makes the most sense. As I've been tracing the genetics that are involved in my Grand Theory videos, if our LJ is true, Jon has the blood of the first men, and with the Starks, he has the others, he has the children of the forest, and now the dragons, right? So 4 major bloodlines that are all tied together now in this one person, probably the only person in this world who has all 4 of those. And he is at a pivotal point in this world, which is the wall. Sometimes north of the wall, sometimes south of the wall. He switches back and forth. Most recently, he's been the Lord Commander on the wall, right? So he can make decisions there. So thematically, if that's his lineage, it fits almost perfectly well with the theme, for him to be there making these major decisions that are going to affect the entire future of this world. If it's some other combination, if it's Ned and Ashara, well, like, kind of, so what, because the theme, he still has the blood of the Starks, let's say, so he has the first men, the children, the others, right? But the dragons aren't there. You have him with some vague, I guess that you'd be angling at dawn, let's say. So it would make more sense if Jon somehow had come across dawn and now he was wielding it in some great climactic battle, for the wall or something like that to affect the future world, but he's not. It's a song of ice and fire. It's not a song of ice and dawn. It makes sense that if he has the blood of the others and the blood of the dragons and he's playing this pivotal role, like literally, he's literally sitting there on a wall. Right? Like, in a way, you could think of him as being on the fence, in a sense, he's actually on the wall, but he's at this point where he has to decide between these 2 different sides. It lacks a lot of meaning if that's not true. And even more so if Rhaegar and Lyanna, created somebody else like Daenerys. There's almost no meaning there, because then that means Dany has the blood of the first men, the children of the forest, the others, the dragons, and she's off in Essos, going around, trying her best to free slaves, do like the various things she's been doing. There's almost like the symbolism there gets very jumbled, like the theme is totally lost because she's in the wrong place to be doing any of these things. I guess that's why I end up coming down on that side more so than anything else, just because Jon fits best with the theme, the overarching theme that's going to, have a profound effect on the future of this world. He's, if that's his lineage, he's in the right place at the right time, and the story makes the most sense. And you can kind of infer the same thing because the show has already been past that point. And I'm not saying that the show now creates canon for the books, but the show demonstrates that John makes the most sense doing these kinds of things. And if there was a big secret, like a double secret that, George R. Martin was alluding to Jon Snow, but actually it's going to end up being somebody else, right? Well, there would have to be a lot of legwork there to make the double secret more compelling than the secret. And you don't see that really being built anywhere in the books that we have to date so far. So he's going to have to pull something out of his hat pretty quick here in the final couple books in order for that to be compelling. Otherwise, it's going to fall flat on its face. The show, having already been past that point, demonstrates that Jon Snow, being that person, makes for the most compelling type of a story. And I'm guessing if that wasn't going to be true, the show probably would have found out something. I don't think D&D have all the secrets of what's going to happen in the book series, but I think they have enough hitting the major plot points that if that wasn't true, they probably would have found out about it and different things would have happened as the show was getting wrapped up. Anyways, it's not to say that I'm right or that any of these other alternative theories are wrong. I am definitely fallible, just like any other theorist out there. Ultimately, we may never get a conclusive answer to this question, but if you're asking for why I choose to come down on that side, that's why I choose to come down on that side. So I think that takes care of it for today. Thank you guys for watching. Thank you guys for subscribing. 4,000 is pretty cool. You guys take care. We'll see you next time.